Klingons, Nazis, and Jews. Oh my. On this episode, I interview Andrew Isker as we talk about everything from Christian nationalism to Star Trek. So join me as we build, fight, protect, and lead. This is the Patriarchy.
Rise up, for men of God, have done with lesser.
Rise up, for men of God, have done with lesser things. Give heart and mind, soul and strength, and serve the King of Kings. Lift high the cross of Christ, tread where His feet have trod. As brothers of the Son of Man, rise up, O men of God.
Thus saith the Lord, the Redeemer of Israel, and its Holy One, to the despised one, to the one abhorred by the nation, to the servant of rulers. Kings will see and arise. Princes will also bow down, because of the Lord who is faithful, the Holy One of Israel who has chosen you. That was Isaiah 49:7. I am Pastor Joseph Spurgeon, and you are listening to the Patriarchy Podcast, a ministry, Sovereign King Church. So I'm back again this week, and I have a good controversial guest on. We'll be talking about non-controversial things, though. And so sorry if you were excited for that, but no. I'm very excited. We're going to have Pastor Andrew Isker on. He is married, has 6 children, lives in Tampon Tim's land up there in Minnesota. But I hear just for one more month. So
Yes.
as long as we're not stupid and elect him, he can get away from him.
That's right.
And he'll be moving to Tennessee, planting a church there. And he's also an author. He's written 2 books, Boniface Option and Christian Nationalism, which he co-authored with Andrew Torba. So welcome to the Patriarchy, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so why are you a Nazi?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you saw the clip from CNN the other day where they had a Republican guy on there. I think it was a gay guy, actually. And they're calling him a fascist and a Nazi and everything. And they actually kicked him off the show because the like pro-Hamas and Hezbollah guy, he's like, I hope your beeper doesn't go off. Like, how could you see that? And so, people just throw that term out, man. Like they just, they're called, I mean, I guess I'm in good company because Donald Trump is one and JD Vance and,
everybody that's ever had a rally everybody that's ever had a rally at the Madison Square Gardens. So
I guess,
the Harlem Globetrotters, everyone else. No.
That's right.
So I wanted to have you on. Sorry, I did not know a whole lot about you other than I've read the Boniface Option, but we met in person. It's been a couple of weeks now. It's called the Jesus and Politics Conference. Pastor Tim Bouchon puts that on up in Syracuse, Indiana. And I've been blessed to be part of it, I guess, all 5 years now. And this year you came, and one of you did a great job speaking. And also, you preached at the Syracuse Baptist Church the next day, and I had never heard a sermon on that particular text, and so that was very encouraging. But for me, I guess what keeps me coming back to the conference, I mean, I love Pastor Tim, love the people there, and enjoy the talks. But one of the things is just the bonfire or the campfire. And so, man, I felt like we were all bonding in our geekdom, our nerddom there after the conference. So
it was all because of Rod Martin.
Rod Martin, did he bring up? How did he bring up? Yeah, we got talking about Star Trek.
It was you had Chat GPT do a roast for every one of us, and it was making fun of how much he liked Star Trek. And I knew Rod a little bit, knew a little bit about him, but I did not know that he is a huge Star Trek guy. And so I like interrupted you. I'm like, whoa, hold on. And I asked Rod, I'm like, which one is your favorite? And I of course know the right answer to that. And it's Deep Space Nine. And he answered correctly. Right. Like, yeah, of course. Deep Space Nine. So we probably talked for about hour and a half just about Star Trek and Deep Space Nine. And I don't get a lot of opportunity to talk about Star Trek with people.
Yeah.
So
man, I got obsessed with Star Trek when I was in high school. In fact, you can still see right here, right above me. Here's Scotty, and I think that's William Riker. Is that Riker? Yep, that's William Riker. And,
number one.
I still
yes. Yeah.
My grandfather passed away a couple years ago, and we went to the house in West Virginia where I grew up. My brother lives there, and I was like, I want to get some of my stuff. I haven't been there, in a while, and they've been storing stuff. So underneath in the basement, or actually underneath the house in the crawl space, I have all this Star Trek memorabilia, and so unopened boxes of Star Trek action figures and stuff, and I got them and all brought them to my kids, and I let them open them. So they have not been open for like 25 years, but hey,
that's what happened to all my Beanie Babies from 6th grade. I went back to my parents' house, and they all immediately tore the tags off, and so millions of dollars down the drain.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I had like cups from McDonald's when they did Star Trek stuff, and I don't know why I saved all that, but
yeah.
I still have a few. I didn't let them open, and I have a Tribble.
Yeah, you be careful with those. Your house will be full of them.
Yeah. Well, I probably replicate more than they do. And so I loved Star Trek. It was great to just talk about. You know what I didn't mention, and I wanted to see you had a favorite episode. My favorite episode is a two-parter, The Way of the Warrior. Do you remember that one?
I think so. Yeah, describe it for me. You refresh my memories.
So it's Worf comes from the Next Generation, and the Klingons are one of them's been taken over by one of the changelings.
That's right.
So they all show up at mass, and then now the Federation is at war not only with the Dominion but with the Klingon Federation, and so there's just they've refitted DS9 with all these weapons. It's just a huge battle, and maybe that's why I liked it. But yeah.
Is that the one where the old, like all the old guys show up again and they're friends with Jadzia? Is that the one?
With who? Nah.
They know Dax, not Jadzia, but they know the. Yeah, now we're really getting deep in the lore.
No, I think that's a couple episodes later. So this kind of reintroduced. I think it may have been the first ones with Worf, but it's when they go all out war. And now from there on out but then I think the Klingons get pretty devastated in the battle with the DS9 and
that's right. Yeah. I remember now. Yeah.
Yeah. So
my favorite, man, there's so many. It's hard to. I mean, the one I brought up was it's not my favorite because it's so disturbing, but the one where Miles O'Brien is like trapped in this mental prison. And I was just talking about my misgivings with Neuralink. What if they did that? What if they put you're in there for 30 seconds, but it's 200 years? It's like the trapping the libs in the crystals meme that's going around right now. Like, what if they do that with Neuralink, where you're trapped in this prison and you're tortured, psychologically for hundreds of years, and just a few moments pass, right? Your mind would be shattered and destroyed. And so, I mean, that's the thing about science fiction in general. When it's really good, is it's it's almost fantasy. It's this fantastical thing but there's enough. It touches reality enough where it's like plausible that human beings could maybe do this at some point in the future, and it opens up so many sociological and psychological and political roads you could go down and think through, and that's, I think, why I like Deep Space Nine so much, because it deals with the real world in a much clearer way. Like the other ones are all kind of very utopian, and this one is the least utopian of all of them, right? Most of the time during that series they're at war, or you're dealing with you're dealing with the former occupation of Bajor and things like that. Like, you're dealing with some heavy stuff throughout the entire series.
There was like a secret, not secret service, but like the CIA. I can't remember what it's called. Remember the Federation, and they were like corrupt. Do you remember that?
Extremely corrupt. Yeah. Where it was like they had their own deep state, and it was what was it called? It was Sloan, I think, was the agent, right?
I wanted to say like MI6, but that's not right.
No, something I can't think of the name off the top of my head right now. If Rod were here, you'd be like that. But but yeah, they had their own deep state. They also had like these hyper autistic people that were like wargaming everything, that appeared in a couple episodes, people with like 400 IQ and they game theory the whole Dominion War. And Oh, that kind of reminds me of like Robert McNamara and like the Vietnam War and how they managed the war in this managerial way and so forth. And so like all sorts of themes like, there's so much, it was so rich in the themes that it traced out. I think it was extremely, extremely well done. And so that's, obviously why it's so much better than all the others.
Imagine how much of Star Trek in general has actually, like, that's supposed to be way off in the future still. And yet some of that tech, like, actually we're enjoying that tech that like I remember watching, when I was a kid, and like, you mean they can talk to each other over distance and see each other's face?
Here we are, dude.
Like, we're on Star Trek right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like, whoa. And even in the original, they just had the little communicators, and it's like, we have cell phones now, just like Captain Kirk and and now it's like, no, we got video the whole time. We're sending a hail.
We even have so I have the little communicator, and you touch it, and that's like Bluetooth headphones is all that is, dude. Because you hit the button.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
We're not far off the holodeck, I don't think, and some of that actually frightens me.
Yeah,
but
no doubt, no doubt. So.
All right. Well, enough of that controversial. I'm sure that was very with the D Space Nine because everybody loves the original or Next Generation. At least you didn't say Captain Janeway was your favorite or something like that.
No.
Okay. So I do want to change subjects here. There's not a good way to segue into this, but.
You can go from the Cardassians, you can go from the Cardassians to the space fascists,
and not the Cardassians like Kanye West Cardassians. We're talking about the aliens there.
Well, maybe that too. I don't.
Maybe they were the same. No, there was like this. I guess this kind of there was the Bajorans and the Cardassians, and the Bajorans were those who had been enslaved or been abused by the Cardassians and stuff. And maybe that'll tie into one of our subjects here in a minute, but. Let's talk about the book that you wrote. Let's talk about Christian nationalism. So now, again, not controversial in the least, right? But, what is Christian nationalism? Can you define it?
Yeah, I think it's, very, very basic terms. It is nations are real things and they should be Christian, right? And that, and you can get into, okay, what does that mean? What does it mean for a nation to be Christian? Does that mean like because you'll have very pietistic people? They'll be like, only individuals can be Christians. Well, how do you can't have things be Christian or groups? But you see this in history. You have 1,500 years of Christendom, where nations, their political structures, their culture. Their way of life was shaped and formed by the Christian faith and the way they lived, their laws, what they viewed as good and evil, what they said should be punished, what they said should be praised. All of it is formed by the truth of the gospel. And their kings, self-consciously, their kings and rulers were in submission to Jesus. That he is their king, right? Even the highest authority in the land is in submission to him. And it's like, well, that's good. So many people think, well, that was bad. Constantine's terrible, all these things. And it's like, well, no, that's actually good. That's what will happen if the gospel is successful. And if you look at the New Testament and you look at, just even the Great Commission, and he sends the disciples out, and no one or very few people stop to think, okay, what happens if we win? If we do go into all the world and we disciple the nations, and the king or the emperor calls us up and says, "Hey, I've been hearing about all this stuff you're saying. I want to know more." And I mean, you're just looking at Acts where Paul gets into trouble and he immediately is before Roman governors, he's before Herod, and he's preaching the gospel to these people, and to the point where one of them is like, "You have almost persuaded me to become a Christian." Yeah. And
Well,
Paul's
even
like,
before
"Good."
that, there was the one of the first, the proconsul was one of the first Christian magistrates, as mentioned in the book of Acts, does convert, and he's a Christian magistrate.
Yeah, and so what do you do there? What happens when the emperor? I mean, you end the New Testament with Paul, with the church in Rome having members of Caesar's household as a part of it in the middle of the first century, and so it's only, I mean, from Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection, ascension, and Pentecost, from that point until the conversion of Constantine is, it's less than 300 years. I mean, that's not a long period of time. You think 300 years ago, from today, 1724, like you had already had 100 years of America, of American colonies being here. Like, America's a very young nation, and it was already 100 years old 300 years ago. And so that's short. That's a short period of time where you have, the Roman emperor convert, become a Christian, and then
yeah, I haven't really. I was going to say, I've obviously thought about that. I've never thought about it in being that short in short terms, but 300 years from Rome killing the founder, if you will, of Christianity, killing Jesus, to a Roman emperor submitting to Jesus. It's
that's quick. That's
amazing,
fast.
actually, to think about. Yeah.
And from there, it's the space of, one longer lifetime, I think, 80 or 90 years till Theodosius makes the Christian religion the religion of the Roman Empire, which did not mean that everything else was illegal and they were going to start persecuting everyone else. It was just simply that we're Christians now, right? This is a Christian empire. And it's interesting because, you think of like Edward Gibbon and many Enlightenment figures, they blame the collapse of Rome, especially modern historians, blame the collapse of Rome on Christianity. I look at it as, all right, I just started preaching at my church on the book of Daniel. I'm leaving soon. I'm going to try to get it all the way done before I leave. In Daniel, right, you have Nebuchadnezzar's dream, and that's God revealing to Nebuchadnezzar and to Daniel his plans to establish the oikomene, right, to establish the great world empires, right, Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. And it's all one contiguous thing, even though there's the different metals, there's different empires that replace one another, but the oikomene is one thing. And that word is used consistently throughout the New Testament, translated often just as world in English, but it means that. It means the Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. And it's the known world, it's the inhabited world, it's the, it's the Greco-Roman world, whatever you want to call that, it's the empire. And why does it collapse? All right, shortly, after Constantine converts, Theodosius makes Christianity the official religion of Rome. Why does it fall apart? Because it served its purpose, right? It served its purpose that God had set it up for, and now, right? But the church remains, right? You see that dream that Nebuchadnezzar has, right? The stone cut without hands comes and smashes the whole thing and grows into a mountain that takes over the entire earth. And Daniel explains to him that is the kingdom of God coming and conquering all the nations, right? And that's what began to happen after that. Like the church didn't disappear; it didn't go away. It spread. It went to everywhere that Rome had been, whether it was among the Franks or in Britain, in Greece, in Byzantium, right? It continues to flourish, and it sustained civilization in these places. We look at it as like the Dark Age. Oh, it's so bad and horrible. Yeah, actually, no. It was a time of flourishing in Europe, right? You obviously you have the setback. Rome declines, and civilization seems to recede, but what they accomplished in the Middle Ages surpassed Rome. And so anyway, all of these things is to say, like, you look at the progression of history and what occurred. You had nations that were self-consciously Christian, where everyone understood that. And I mean, you see that with guys like Russell Moore is, our guys kind of use him as a punching bag, and it's justified. But he writes the article about, Mayberry no more, or whatever. Mayberry is like Sodom or whatever.
Mm-hmm. I remember that.
Yep. Just decrying cultural Christianity because it produces false. And it's so preposterous on its face, because so many people, I mean, you know them, I know them, everyone listening knows them, like, that grew up with cultural Christianity, with Christianity all around, pervading everything. Just everything everybody understood was good and right and just and moral. It was given to them because everyone, whether they were a sincere, genuine believer or not, they all partook in these same things. And it was a good place for many people who, most people don't think about theology. They don't think too deeply about things, right? They do what they're told. And that's a much better place to be when they're told, you should believe in Jesus. Just so, 'cause I mean, you look at right now, look at how many people turn on the TV and they will believe implicitly that Donald Trump is the reincarnation of Adolf Hitler, and he is going to do all sorts of evil, horrible things, and they implicitly believe it because the TV told them so. Like, most people simply respect authority, and they listen to what authority tells them. The TV is very authoritative, right? Imagine if the TV was telling them, right, you should believe in Jesus, right? You should read your Bible. You should trust Jesus for your salvation, right? That is true. And you should be married and stay married, right? Wives should submit to their husband. Like, imagine if that was the message in every movie and everything else. Like, would that be a bad thing? If that was going on, if millions of people everywhere just thought, like, yeah, everyone else is a Christian, I should be too, right? Would their belief be insincere in that case, right? I mean, these people sincerely
I think you
believe.
could argue it prepares people for the gospel in a good way. I mean, God can work without that, but
of course, yeah.
I mean, if we love to read the Reformers and Puritans, and when they preach and stuff, that they're assuming a whole lot that because the culture has known it, and we still have vestibles of it. I was just thinking the other day, like, I've never been to an atheist funeral.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Every funeral I've ever been to is initiated or led by a pastor, a minister, or a funeral home director who still makes it religious. Even as a person with as an atheist, it's like, when it comes to funerals, we're all religious, if not Christian, explicitly Christian in our nation. So,
I'm sure there's probably some where it's like,
I'm sure, you could always.
He's now decomposing and turning into a beautiful tree or something,
you got some hippie funeral.
His
I'm
consciousness
sure,
is part of the universe now, or what? Like, I'm sure those people do those kind of things. But
Gene Roddenberry, take his stuff in his
that's right. Yeah,
bring it back around. There we go. There's the tie-in.
Yeah, there's the segue. Yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you this: how does your view of Christian nationalism? Because I would, if I'm going to summarize it, it's broadly that a nation should be Christian, intentionally say we're Christian, and try to rule by God's commands. How does your view compare with or differ with Stephen Wolf's view? I mean, I don't know if you've read his book.
Yeah, I have.
I'm assuming you have.
Yep.
And this is not I'm not trying to pit you against him. I'm just,
no.
How does your view fit in with his? Is there nuances that are different? Are they pretty much the same? It's just his maybe worded in kind of a more academic way. What is that?
Yeah, I mean, there are people that, constantly try to pit, us against Wolf and things like that. I mean, our starting point is, more explicitly biblical, in the sense that, right, we just start with the Great Commission and work from there. That's not his starting point, which I don't have a problem with that at all. He starts from different, from Reformed tradition, from Protestant political theory, and so forth, which is perfectly fine. And so there's not a tremendous amount of conflict between our views or visions. Especially, our book, we wanted to, because it was a very hot topic right before the 2022 election. And, I saw this and Torba saw this, like we would just see, normal, decent Christian folks, being slandered and attacked as just these horrible extremists and terrorists and awful people. And it was just simple, decent Christians who were like, Jesus is king. I love the Lord Jesus, and I do political things. I vote, or I do any kind of political activism. I go to protests or am involved in various political things because I'm a Christian, and I want us to have Christian laws. I want good things. I don't want babies murdered. I don't want all the insane woke stuff to be happening. I want things to be better. And so we saw these people just being slandered in the media, and I'm like, well, there's and particularly not just in the media, because you expect libs and the regime apparatchiks and stuff to say the things they do, but the thing that galled me the most was Christian leaders condemning Christian nationalism, saying that this is bad. We're not like that. We don't do those things. And so it was I wanted to put together a defense of Christians being involved politically, right? That was my main goal. That was Torba's main goal. That I'm seeing all of my people, Christians in America, being attacked for caring about politics, and I want to defend them. And so that's the main goal. Whereas Wolf, I think, and so ours was really short. We wanted to get it out quick. I mean, we worked on it for a month, and maybe 5 weeks. And we're like, we got to get this out there right now because this is the moment. We can't miss it. And whereas Stephen, he had put together a lot of this came from his dissertation, I believe, and had worked on it over the course of a year or two. Very, very long, deliberate academic work, and so he's grounding it in just basic reform political thought, right? Defining, okay, what is a nation? I mean, that is actually a really valid question. A lot of people, I mean, it's an issue this political season. President Biden, when he was running, and then Kamala after that, are pushing this concept that America is merely an idea, right? It's just an idea, right? Whereas J.D. Vance and I think Trump recently too have said, no, America is a nation. It's a people, right? It's a people with a history, with shared values, with shared culture. It's a people. Not everyone in the world is an American, and that's like, whoa, that's really. I mean, you say that 100 years ago, and everybody like, well, yeah, of course. But of course, if you said 100 years ago that men are men and women are women and men can't become women, they'd be like, yeah, of course. But that's a really controversial statement to make too. And so, these things that, 100 years ago, people would not even bat an eye at, now are extremely controversial. And
why do you think that is? So why one of my questions, my pre-written questions is, and you're kind of hitting it, but why is Christian nationalism and what a nation is, why is this such a controversy? Why does this draw so much heat? I understand why from maybe the world, but why is it even within the church, do you think, that it draws so much heat?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think that this is controversial even in our smaller circles. I firmly believe that the middle of the 20th century was an epochal event in that you have 20th century liberalism take hold of the culture, right? The kind of liberalism that, the New Dealers, Franklin Roosevelt, people in that world believed, and then it gets obviously much further developed since, that America is not a distinct nation with, Anglo-Protestant culture and heritage and way of life, that it's merely an idea. It's, we can certainly by the 1960s, it becomes a thing where we can bring, millions, tens of millions of people in and change the demographics of the country. But even before that, it was, and you see this in, immediately post-war in the 1950s and 60s, the cultural changes that occurred in America, where instead of being explicitly Christian, because you even see President Roosevelt during the Second World War calling Americans to prayer and fasting at various points, which today would be, people would go apoplectic if any president did that. And there every president would have explicit invocation of not just God generally saying God bless America and things like that, but the Christian God. And that has, fallen by the wayside, where it becomes, you have this, God, where it's God of the American civic religion, where it's just this vague God, or like in the Acts 17 sense, the unknown God, right? Where it becomes we become very secularized, right? Secularism really takes off in the post-war era, where we can't have any one religion have cultural hegemony over us.
I got a question about this because I want to play devil's advocate a little bit. Push back
of course.
Yeah. Okay. Because this is kind of the big hot topic right now too. We're going to get down a rant. So one of it is post-war. What is it called? Post-war consensus.
Yes.
So here's my pushback.
Mm-hmm.
Are you, or not really a pushback, this is maybe a question for clarification. How about that? Are you saying that the war itself causes this, or like the fact that Nazis lose causes this? If the Nazis would have won, or if we had not gotten involved, none of that would happen? Are you saying that if...
No.
Or is this because my pushback would be this is stuff that's already in development pre-war.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like you have the flapper movement, you have the whole roaring 20s, you got feminism, you
have suffragettes. Yeah. So I mean, I think so many of these things are in development. And I think that's where people get tripped up a lot with, talking about the post-war consensus. It's not as though there wasn't, secularism before that. It's not as though there weren't things doing and developing in the early 20th century, or even the late 19th century. I think it's that at that moment, everything gives way after 1945.
Would you say maybe that's a consequence of like I'm still having a hard time maybe connecting the dot from the war to this. So help me. That's the place where I need help connecting. What about the war or the thing actually causes this?
Yeah. So
would it be better to simply say this is development of the 20th century, war, not war?
No, I don't think it is.
Okay.
It's because, we talk about, maybe you talk about this. I certainly do. And it's kind of just in the general discussion, the regime with a capital R, right? The regime that rules over, and it's not just the Democrats or whatever. It's, Washington, D.C. It has tremendous power, and they push all of these things. Like where does the regime, where does it come from, right? Because it wasn't there in 1920 or 1890 or anything like that. But it certainly is after 1945, right? So you have I mean, I would situate it in the New Deal regime, and it's
Sure.
permanently entrenched because so many political changes occurred during the war, where now you have tremendous power, right, of the military industrial complex and everything that grew, the size of the state that grew during the Great Depression, during Roosevelt's reign in America, and all of those people pushed secularism and brought it into power. Where now, right, and you can even kind of see, like, I often reference like Google Ngram and certain things. I know this is a topic you want to get to, but like, just even like the phrase Judeo-Christian, right, isn't really used very much until, right, you can watch it. It's like, oh, there's a little bit there, and then 1945, 1950, it just starts shooting straight up, right, and it's like, oh, that's interesting. Or even if you look at a phrase like Imago Dei, right, it's like it's there in the literature, a little bit, but then after 1945, 1950, takes off, right? I mean, all sorts of phrases like that. And it's correlation isn't causation, and but it's like, oh, it's interesting. A lot of things change at that point. I mean, even like you think of the post-war era, right? You think about Christmas, right? You think about the war on Christmas. There, we're gonna fight the war. We're gonna say Merry Christmas again, right? Right. You think about the war on Christmas, and Starbucks changing their cups and stuff like that. You think about that issue, right? You think about the music, right? You go to the department. We're almost to Christmas time, right? It's not even Halloween yet, but all the Christmas stuff's out, right? You go to the department store, you go to the mall, you go to wherever, and they've got music playing, from November until January, and all the music you hear.
I love it.
Yeah, I do too. Right, but think of the music that came in the 40s, and the 1950s, 1960s, all the Christmas music. None of it is mentioning Christ.
None of it's actually about Christmas. Yeah.
And maybe it's tangentially related to White Christmas or whatever, but none of it is Christmas carols, right? The things that were sung in the 17 and 1800s. It's all songs about Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and things like that, right? And that's deliberate. It's not, it's not in that period, right? Christmas became this thing where you have Santa and Coca-Cola, and it becomes a very commercial thing and everything else. Like that isn't random either. It's a it's just an example. Like, I'm not saying like that's the thing that caused everything to collapse is
Santa Claus. It's all Santa Claus.
We just get rid of Santa. But you see, you notice things like that where
you certainly do. What I'm trying to see is,
but I can bring it back to.
No, what I'm saying is, I think the phrase is helpful in the post-war consensus. You're trying to get at something. I'm trying to avoid what I think often is a mischaracterization of people that have a. So people, I think there's an assumption by you saying post-war consensus that people are saying that you are saying if the Nazis had won.
Oh yeah, if they'd won, everything would be great. Yeah,
we'd all be Christians and
that's. I don't think that. I mean, some people maybe think that's what it implies, but it's more so the American regime comes into power and has remained in power since then, and has dominated our culture and pushed secularism, pushed egalitarianism, pushed all of these things, and so like that's where it comes from. And for an example, I know that I think on my podcast we're going to have CJ and I are going to have Paul Gottfried talk about this. He's talked about some of these things quite a bit. He's fluent in German, very interested in German, post-war, Cold War, politics, contemporary politics in Germany and throughout Europe, very knowledgeable about these things. And one point that he brought up when we were at a conference, we were doing a Q&A and talking about post-war consensus and all these kind of things, is the two, and maybe I talked to you about this, or I don't know if I talked about it in the conference or not, but you have so Germany obviously is divided after the war, right? You have the East occupied by the Soviet Union. They established the German Democratic Republic, and the United States, Great Britain, France, they occupy the West and established the Bundesrepublik. And the two occupations were very, very, very different, obviously. The Soviets were incredibly brutal. Right? You have the Stasi, where everyone's snitching on their neighbors, and the secret police going around, taking people to gulags, torturing them, killing them. And in the West, you didn't have that, right? And so we think, well, the West was free. They were free and democratic, and it was so wonderful. And we rebuilt their entire economy, and they have, comparatively, I mean, even today, right, the GDP of West Germany, of the former West Germany, is way higher than former East Germany. They had massive material success, but the other thing that happened there was we controlled them from the top down, and culturally, we socially re-engineered Germany, where people in Germany feel tremendous shame, not only over the 20th century, but their whole history. It's like, well, all the history we had that led up to that led to the 20th century, so we are the most evil people who have ever existed, and they're cowered in shame always for everything. And you think about that today, like the implications of it, over 30 years after or almost 30 years after the fall of the Berlin Wall, today, right, you have Germany inundated with migrants from Syria, from Afghanistan, these Muslim third world people. There's a horrible amount of crime, like tons of crime and rapes and murders and things like that they do. And the people in West Germany, just are like, no, we can't criticize that. That's bad, because the second you start criticizing that, well, then you're a Nazi. It's bad. Whereas in East Germany, it isn't remotely the same, the former East Germany. So you look at the AfD, the purported, right-wing party in Germany, really just anti-immigration party. In East Germany, that's where they have their biggest support of Alternative for Deutschland. And in West Germany, it's way, way, way lower. And you have, and it's crazy there. Like, you have one of their ministers was put in jail because she just tweeted out or posted somewhere online the rape statistics of migrants, right? Well, you can't, that's illegal. You can't do that. You're going to jail for that, right? Even though, like, these are the government's own statistics. And so anyway, the United States did social reengineering of West Germany on purpose. It wasn't an accident. It was a clear plan. And so you think about that in the context of the whole discussion of the West, right? Whether it's France or Great Britain or America itself, that same program has been run on us. That we believe that our own history, our own heritage is evil, right? We tear down statues. We melt down Robert E. Lee's face. We even exhume his horse's grave and take away the grave marker. Think just insane stuff. Like in my own state, they tore down the statue of Christopher Columbus, right? Tim Walz just let him do it. And we were made to believe that our ancestors were the most evil people who ever lived. That America is a uniquely evil place. That everything they ever did is horrible and evil, but we're good, and we're going to change all of that. And the way that we change all of that is anyone who wants to come to America can come, right? That's kind of the program that has been run on us. And I don't think it's like accidental. I don't think it's just like, well, this is just the process of history and what happens. And so, so much of it though, like you were saying, like it has its roots in the Enlightenment. That it really, the Enlightenment is this nihilistic project where you take away the purpose of people, right? You take away, like, what is my nation for, right? Why does it even exist, right? Well, America has no purpose, so it really doesn't matter. And I mean, that even goes back to the question of like birth rates, right? Why aren't we reproducing? It is. I don't even think it's. I mean, I think obviously it's feminism. It's feminism, but it goes even deeper than that, right? Why is feminism? Why does it flourish here? Because it could have flourished at any point in all of history. Why now? Because right, you remove the purpose of a people to exist, and that's what grows up. Right, these weeds that grow up in the soil of a dead society, and so I mean, it's a long historical progression, right? It doesn't, it didn't just show up in 1945, but it reaches its zenith, right? It comes into its own, into power from the top down at that point.
I guess you would say because the American empire really begins in earnest there. With our control of the whole world.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think that's where I would put it.
Military industrial complex, which has been warned about before then, but it's really able to take the Cold War, all the stuff that we're doing with that. Yes.
When you even look at like the counterculture of the 1960s, the counterculture of the 1960s was like on purpose, right? You can read up on all this stuff that all of the crazy hippie stuff, right? These are all guys like Jim Morrison of the Doors. His dad was an admiral, and so much of the things happening in that time, right? You're even like modern art was a CIA project, right? They're intentionally subverting culture on purpose, right? And it's like, well, to what end? Why? And I think this is why.
I think Scripture is helpful with this because when you think who's doing this, I mean, we can point to different groups of people and stuff. Ultimately, the Scriptures tell us we don't wage war against flesh and blood. I mean, there are spiritual battles, and this is that. I think we're seeing darkness and the battle of the two kingdoms, if you will, of
light and dark,
light and light and dark. Well, we kind of took a really big. This is like a Donald Trump weave we just did.
That's what.
That's good, dude. We did it. It was great. I want to come back to the Christian nationalism where we left off.
Yeah.
Bring us back in. So that is why it's such a controversy because we've gotten there. Okay.
Well, and because I mean, both those things, right? Nations are a real thing. They exist, and they're good, and they should be Christian. Both of those things simultaneously fly directly in the face of the entire regime, right? Both of those things, because the regime is secularist. Right, it says nobody can have, no religion can have cultural hegemony, and it's also, bizarrely egalitarian, where all human beings everywhere are all the same, and they're interchangeable parts, and they don't matter. They have no history, right? Because, I mean, history and culture and historic way of life, like that's a nation's soul, right? That's what you are, and so the project is to just rip that away from you, where if you hate your fathers, right, you're taking away that person's soul, right? You're taking what they are, they're the deepest roots they have. You're just uprooting all of it and saying, no, they're all evil. They don't exist. You are just an individual, interchangeable with anyone else on the planet. And so that's why Christian nationalism is so controversial, so hated by the regime, because both of those things, right? Both of those things are the thing that they hate.
All right. Well, I want to, so you helped me define Christian nationalism, why it's somewhat a controversy. I'm sure there's more. And, that we can go with that. I want to ask some pastoral questions regarding this before I move into another kind of related subject we've already kind of touched, but pastoral questions. So some are going to argue that Christian nationalism is a fad. It's like the young, restless, and reformed. So how, for one, what do you say about that? And then two, as someone who has written a book, so that somewhat makes you a leader in the movement, or how do you keep it from being a fad? How is that? Is this something we're going to talk about now, and then 5-10 years down the line, it'll be Christian, whatever, something else,
done and over with? Yeah. I don't think so. And I think, especially Stephen's work that he's done will have staying power. All right, because what he's done is rooted these things in historic, reformed political tradition, right? Where guys are reading old books that influenced men 100, 200, 300 years ago in how they viewed the political. And so, right, I don't think those things were fads, right? I don't think would you say the Protestant Reformation was a fad? No, I don't think so. And so I think resurrecting, bring new life to historic Protestant political thought. I don't think that's something that's gonna, that's here today and gone tomorrow, right? Whereas, you look at the young restless Reformed thing was kind of nebulous. It was like everyone's kind of Calvinist now, I guess. You got all of these disparate guys from every end of the spectrum. John MacArthur, who's a dispensationalist, and R.C. Sproul, who's traditional Presbyterian, and John Piper, and all then Mark Driscoll over here. That's who knows what he is. And they all believe in the sovereignty of God, and that was kind of the tie that binds all of it. And it was this big thing for a while, but it sort of blew up. I think partly because each one of these guys is so different. Each one of the polls was very, very different, and it was a fad in the sense that it was the hot big thing, but it sort of got overtaken by Big Eva, right? You have the Gospel Coalition really kind of swoop in and seize the momentum, become this thing, and that sort of died off now. I mean, you look at like their Twitter account, and I mean, there are guys that have Twitter accounts of a few hundred followers that get more engagement than they do, unless they say something really stupid. Because no engagement at all.
I guess one of the things I would think is that movement was necessary to help in reforming. I mean, obviously, I don't know about you, but I'm somewhat a product of that. I liked Driscoll at the time, and I
like some of the things he's saying now too. Actually,
yeah. And people mock that whole "how dare you" sermon. Actually, that actually is what got me to repent of pornography. And so, but I think it splinters because people were headed off in a different direction. Some are going to reclaim, I would say, more of the confessional Reformed, and then some went off into the woke world, right? Some went off into that nonsense, and then some went off other different places. And so that is, you're free to disagree. I have a fear, not really a fear. That's not the right word. I just have a suspicion that'll be kind of similar to what happens with Christian National. There will be good men that will take these truths, bring them in line with the confessions, in line with it won't be like this cage stage, all they talk about, but that'll be the thing. And then there'll be other men that I'm afraid of, and we'll get to here in a little bit, will really take off with the ethno part of it to the point of embracing like the Stone Choir guys that do like the Nazism stuff. And so I can see it getting going into different groups. And so as a pastor, I'm like, I want to encourage my people to follow the truth.
Yes.
And not get taken off into wild areas. And I personally don't care if as a movement it's a fad, but I do want the truths of what we're talking about to exist. And they will, because they are God's truths. And so
I think with a lot of it, some of it correlates with even like the collapse of young, restless, and reformed. I think what you're saying is accurate, that like the politically and culturally there was this clear dichotomy that happened late in Obama's second term, where wokeness starts to emerge. And a good chunk go off in that direction. Most don't, but it sort of fizzles out. I think with this though, so much of it is that politically and culturally, the trajectories that things are on, that you have a tremendous number of young men that are coming into the church from the online right. That I think is the difference, where this was like the young restless reform thing. I don't think it was, oh, we're getting all of these people who are not Christians and bringing them in. It was, these are people kind of, guys that grew up in evangelical churches, and now they've become, Calvinist in their soteriology and so forth. This, I think, is a little bit different, where you have people that have been in the church and in, largely Reformed churches that begin investigating, okay, what did the Reformers think about politics? Or what did Christians think about politics in the 1600s and 1700s and 1800s? And that's beginning to emerge. Just historic Christian political thought. But then also you have all of these thousands of guys who they're involved in like right-wing politics on the internet and getting very red-pilled and all sorts of things. And here's Christianity that they can sort of respect. Right, here are Christian men saying things that are true, and they also see culturally that Western civilization needs Christianity, right? It needs strong. I mean, Elon Musk has said that even, and so they're coming at it from outside the church, coming into the church, and many of them have been have gone way on the deep end on so many different topics, because the Overton window has opened up, especially online, at least in private. People anonymously can investigate all sorts of things they're not allowed to talk about in public. And so then they come into the church, and men have to, teach them, right, what do Christians believe and so forth. So I think in those terms, right, so some of the fears or concerns, I guess, you would have, and many other people would have, are probably around that politically things have gone so far right wing so fast, that things that you would never have expected 20 years ago to be sort of at the center of discourse are now here. And I think a lot of pastors are unprepared to have those discussions with a lot of young men, and kind of just rely on I don't want to say the post-war consensus, but what everybody thought about everything, right? Well, no one will think this crazy thing, and now I mean, or I could even do it with guys that believe the world is flat, right? Maybe you have guys in your church that are convinced the world is flat. Like, if you told me 20 years ago that as a pastor, that would be a thing you have to like talk about, right? Is not what I ever would have thought, right? And so you have guys that get really into QAnon or something, 4 years ago, and having to, kind of say like, all right, I don't think there are tunnels with, millions of children and things like that. Some of that's pretty crazy, but in dealing with people, like I've talked with pastors, like, these two guys in church, I don't know what to do with it, and it's causing problems. And my, perspective has just been, all right, well, some of it is like, what's the basis of why people believe this, right? It's because they want it to be true, right? Why does anybody believe anything? They want it to be true. And so they want to believe that there's a secret cabal of good guys that are running the country. And in my line with them is like, yeah, I don't think it's true, but I kind of wish it was. I kind of wish it was. And so I
wish Trump would have done some of the stuff they were saying that would have happened, right? Yeah.
That he's secretly in charge, or the Patriots are in control, right? And so, and you do that, and I'm not saying that deceitfully or anything like it's like, yeah, it'd be great if it was true. But rather, like you come at it from that angle, and you have credibility with these guys, like you can walk them back from, it's a little bit crazy, man, don't you think? Whereas if I came at them from, I'll just finish quick. Like if I came at them from the perspective, this is insane. You need to repent of this insanity. You are a bad person that you believe, about the mole children and all that kind of stuff, and adrenochrome and wherever else. Like, you're a terrible person for believing this stuff, right? Would I get anywhere with those guys? Of course not. Not at all. And so I think they're going to be, in the same vein, there are going to be a lot of guys that will believe things that will strike you as nuts, that you can't, like 20 years ago, you'd be like, this guy's bananas. This guy is a wacko. But today you're like, I need to win this guy and reel him back in. Right. And so pastoral is very hard. It's difficult.
Yeah. I think you're answering one of the questions I was going to ask is about pastoral care because this is, so when I say I'm concerned, all this, I identify as a Christian nationalist. So
yeah.
Those are my pronouns are Christian and nationalist. So right. But I am a pastor first and foremost, and so I have a great heart for men. That's why I do this podcast. It's why I want to see, and I'm excited to seeing young men kind of turn away from feminism and get awoke and all that stuff. And I do have pastoral concerns about that. I want to see that I have about how to help disciple men who get into things that are not true. Because as Christians, we have a duty to believe what's true. And we have also a duty to make sure that we don't get carried away from the core truth of the gospel. I just preached this week, 1 Timothy, about the Reformation. I was talking about the Reformation, but in particular about recovering the core truths. And it's very easy, like the Jewish myths, like the endless genealogies, get carried away. But that could be a placeholder for about anything, including Christian nationalism, I think, where men get this, they wrap up their identity completely in it, to where they think they're actually accomplishing much, but all they've done is post memes. And it's not saying that posting memes isn't doing something. I guess I get political propaganda type stuff. I get that, but
I like memes. Yeah.
I like memes, but as a pastor, I want to see those men take responsibility in their homes and in leading others. I want them to have a love for the church.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a question I want to ask. You're kind of answering it. I agree. We don't want to come in just go straight at them. We wouldn't do that with anybody else. So hard, but we do speak truth to each other. Am my concerns unfounded to you? What do you think about that? And how maybe some advice you would have for men who hear about Christian nationalism, get excited, and maybe tempted to this is the thing, and there's other areas they have to work on before we ever even have a Christian nation. You know what I mean? So
absolutely.
Just talk about that for a while.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one of the things, we just, I just did a podcast with Stephen Wolf, and we reviewed Matt Chandler's sermon on politics. All right. It was hard. It was not fun to, sit through that. And there were a couple guys that commented I could only make it 10 minutes. And I'm like, well, we did the whole thing. You should too. But so much of that was him hectoring the people in his congregation for caring too much about politics, right? And approaching it from a very pietistic standpoint, that and opposing grace and nature together, right? Rather than saying no, like grace restores nature, right? And builds upon it. And so, right, it shouldn't be you care about this stuff too much, right? It should be, all right, it's good that you care about these things. It's important that you care about these things. The fact that you care about these things probably demonstrates that you're a Christian, right? Because Christians should care about these things, but it can't be the only thing you care about. At the core of who you are needs to be your faith and what you love, and the church, and loving God's people, and serving the church, serving your family, faithfully filling the role as a father, discipling your children. And that is how the outwork of in your life, the influence you have to build the kingdom of God, to do these things. Like you want these things, right? You want things to change. You want things to be better, right? There are things you personally can do to make them better, and you should direct all of yourself to that, right? In order to accomplish those ends. And so rather than saying, no, you care about this stuff too much, saying, or you care about these things, and so because you care about these things, here's what you should be doing, right? You should be going to church faithfully. You should be reading your Bible, praying with your family, teaching your children about the Lord, faithfully working and providing income for them, building up, your household, in order to build a Christian nation. Like that's where you get Christian nations, as Christian households. And so, I think coming at it from that perspective, where you need to affirm what these guys care about, and not diminish them or poo-poo them like Matt Chandler would, or many other big Eva figures would, but rather say, this is good that you care about that. You need to care about, at the fundamental level, the kingdom of God and your role on that.
Sure. Yep. Well, we are an hour and 5 minutes. You got a little bit in you left?
I got some more. Yeah, we could go
Okay.
like Trump on Rogan. We could just.
All right. Okay. Good. No, I think this is helpful, because obviously one of the slanders towards you is that you only care about politics. You don't care about the church and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So and I know that not to be true, having talked to you. Let me ask you, since we've been hitting all the controversial topics, let's talk about Doug Wilson. No, I'm just kidding.
I love Doug.
No, I was going to talk about your interview with Doug in particular.
Yeah.
And the issue of Judaism and Jews, because somehow this is now intimately tied. It seems like, I don't think it necessarily is, but it's tied to the whole argument about Christian nationalism. Now everything's talking about Jews.
Yeah.
There's, even today or yesterday, I think Joel Webben and others are having arguments about how to, even similar to what we just talked about, handling some of this stuff. You had, I guess, a debate with Doug Wilson on, what was that on? Was that Man Rampant? What was that? I can't remember what that was.
No, it was No Quarter November, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was just a thing. Okay. Yeah. Did you guys burn something while you were there?
We didn't.
Oh, shoot.
I really wanted to, but there wasn't any time. Yeah.
What was the core of your disagreement with him?
Yeah, I think, we have different, it's funny because our eschatological views are like 99% the same. But I think we mostly have disagreement over Romans 11, right? Over how we view Romans 11, and his view is, more common post-mill view that Romans 11 means that for all time until, I guess, the end, and I'm trying to characterize it accurately, and so if I get anything wrong, it's my fault.
I will correct you because I hold to that position. There we go.
That Romans 11, that the gifts of the calling are irrevocable, and that throughout the period of time, the last few thousand years and on into however much future there is, right? They will exist, and at the very end they'll be grafted back in. Whereas my view is, the partial preterist view of Romans 11, where, the ingrafting back in, and so much of this, even to back up a little bit, is just the idea of the Jew-Gentile distinction, being something particular to the Old Covenant, that within the Old Covenant, from Abraham until the New Covenant, right, that Jew and Gentile were kept separate. They were distinct, right? That these are the people within the covenant, and these are the people outside. And even therein, right, all throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament, there are Gentile God-fearers, right? That wasn't the only way to get saved, and Doug would not disagree with that at all. And so, but these two categories, and I think where the disagreement is right? There's two categories of humanity, right? The two buckets that they're in the covenant order that God had established. In the new covenant, this collapses, right? That the chief distinction is no longer Jew and Gentile. It's in Christ and not in Christ. And with the destruction and end of the old covenant, right, that other category of Jew, the biblical category of what is a Jew, right, a member of Abraham, a member of the old covenant, that no longer exists, right, biblically speaking. Right now, the people, the ethnic group, the ethno-religious group, they continue on, of course, but as a category, as a distinct biblical category of Jew or Gentile, for that matter, as well. Neither of those two categories are operative after the end of the Old Covenant. And so, if that's true, I think it's true, then if Paul's talking about Jews in the biblical sense, right, not as an ethnic group, but rather, right, Old Covenant Jews as this category of biblical people, being broken off of the tree and then grafted back in. I think he's talking about a conversion of Jews before the destruction of the Old Covenant that takes place. That Israel is
before
grafted
70
back
AD.
in. Yeah, and that's the partial preterist view of Romans 11. That's fulfilled. I think one of the arguments that supports it is there are time markers in Romans 9 through 11 that Paul's talking. He's talking about the present time, right? He's talking about, right, this thing that is currently occurring. And one of the, it's ironic because I'm like, okay, this group of people, this biblical category of Jews, not being a thing that exists anymore. It's ironic because you have, all of these passages that people, sometimes trot out, right? Whenever you get, especially nowadays, you get the discussion, well, who killed Jesus? Like you brought up those Romans. It's like, yes, that's true. And the Bible also, Peter says you did it. Or passages like in Revelation, the synagogue of Satan, or Thessalonians, right, enemies of all mankind, things like that. I look at that and I think that is about them. That group of people in the first century, that category of people that no longer exist anymore. So like when people are like, Jews killed Jesus, it's like, well, not these people today, right? They don't have a covenant anymore that they are part of, right? That's gone. And it's been dead for almost 2,000 years. No, that's not them. That's the first century Jews. And so it's funny because people are always like, "Oh, Andrew, you're this anti-Semitic guy or whatever." I'm like, it wasn't them. Ben Shapiro didn't do it.
Are you sick of feminism and its rotten fruit on display all around you? So are we. Are you tired of your home and family life suffering? Okay, so what are you going to do about it? Complain on the internet? Sure, just stay angry and passive. Let your wife and children struggle. When misery sets in, you can blame the culture for your marriage woes, just as feminists blame the patriarchy for their problems. Nah, don't be like them. Choose a better path. Become the best man your wife and children have ever known. Lead with strength and compassion. Take responsibility. Live for the glory of God. Provide your wife the security to flourish in her God-given femininity, and your children a foundation to grow in the Lord. You were born into this feminist age. Yes, you were born in a rapidly feminist generation. But that was no accident. You were put into this chapter of human history by the deliberate design of your Heavenly Father. You were made to build, fight, protect, and lead. You were made for the patriarchy. Join us at the Patriarchy Conference. Become the best man your wife and children have ever known. November 8th and 9th, 2024. Embrace your calling. Transform your family. Impact the world. Registration is open now. Because I'm tracking with you, but I'm not tracking with you.
Yeah.
This is the confusing part. I'm trying to tease this out.
Yeah,
They don't exist as a category in what I think mean
as a biblical category of people. Yeah, covenantal people.
Biblical.
Yeah.
I think not. I don't think you should say biblical.
Okay. What?
I think you should say covenantal because
that's better. Yeah, I'll grant you that,
because they still exist
mm-hmm.
as a particular ethnicity,
mm-hmm.
A particular people that way.
Yeah,
right.
No, that's true. Yeah.
So
yeah.
they don't.
But the biblical category. So when I use biblical, I mean like the biblical category is a covenantal one, right? It's not even it's not even a national one or an ethnic one, right? And because Doug and many other guys will rightly point out correctly that the covenant was not on ethnic grounds, right? You have all sorts of non-ethnic Jews, you know, that are part of. I mean, even the very beginning, Abraham gets circumcised, Ishmael is circumcised, but also all of his slaves are circumcised. They're not blood related to him at all. You have Israel leave Egypt as a mixed multitude. And so, I mean, and you have all the various examples of Ruth or Hagar, or not Hagar, in Judges, the
Rahab.
Yes.
Rahab,
yeah. Like you have all these various examples of
sure.
non-Jews
so
joining the covenant. Yeah.
Is always been more than just those descended by blood.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's better to say, maybe you can feel free to disagree with me, but I think Ken Gentry's argument has some weight, is that they are, I don't think he came up with this, but I just read his commentary on Revelation. They are not done away with the covenant. They're kicked out of the covenant.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that? So, as far as like they were branches,
mm-hmm.
and they've been pruned out, which is what the book of Romans talks about. So I want to hope you don't mind me pushing back when I'm fun with this. So
no, that's okay. Yeah, I don't expect every Reformed guy to
I'm
say
not accusing
I'm going to join the minority reports rather than the majority report on various views.
I'm just curious about it. I've never actually argued this, so guys are getting to see this live.
Well, yeah, and I mean,
so
think,
you say when Paul's not talking, you say he's not talking about ethnic, but he actually says he's talking about his kinsmen by blood. So how is he not talking about his ethnic group? That's my first question. The second one is, what evidence is there of before 70 AD of this huge ingrafting back in of a bunch of Jews? Like what I've never heard Josephus or anybody talk about a big revival among the Jews. Actually, I see the opposite.
Well, I wouldn't expect Josephus to he
reports
about that.
Well, okay, maybe there would be somebody. Is there any Christian sources in history that talk about a bunch of Jews?
There are some. Yeah, there's some a little bit. I mean, even some of it is after the destruction of Jerusalem and Judea. There is mass repentance. I mean, you can even look at like DNA evidence. It's interesting. The like Palestinian, Lebanese, all the Christians in the Levant, right, have the highest percentage of first century Jewish blood, right? Even more than Israelis. Which, I mean, that's fascinating. And you think about that, and it's like, well, and even like Muslims in the Levant that are native to that area have a substantial amount of Jewish blood, which is, it makes sense historically, because that whole area was Christian until the Muslim invasions, and the only people that remained Christian were the upper classes that could pay the jizya. Right, of course they've remained throughout time, and so and they're a very small, very, very small ethnic group in that area, and so there would be a lot of consanguinity among them, where they would kind of keep the same genome, probably have a lot of genetic problems too, but nevertheless, like that makes a lot of sense, and so there's there are some. I mean, you have Eusebius talking about conversions before and after. And so I don't know. I mean, I think it's at least plausible. I'm not going to bank the entire case on whether it's an argument from silence either way, right? Whether it did or did not happen.
Well, I don't know. I'm not arguing. I'd have to.
Yeah.
I'm arguing that the burden of proof is on you to prove that. I don't have to prove a negative.
Yeah, I know right? You don't. You don't have to prove the negative. I need to prove the positive. But if the evidence doesn't exist for or against it, you can't state the case on that. You can only
You might say, well, there's no evidence on this particular thing, but I'm going to go with what you would argue about the text.
I'm basing it on the text more than anything else.
Sure.
And so my basis is not okay. We have clear evidence that this happened historically or not, because there isn't a whole lot either. I mean, we only have, for the whole period, the history of it, we have one Jewish general that betrayed his people for the whole history of the period, right? And so it's like, how much? I mean, how much can I trust this guy that everything is accurate that he says? And that's always the difficult thing when people. I haven't read Gentry's commentary on Revelation, but a lot of post-mill and preterist commentaries on Revelation really heavily rely on Josephus, and I think that's almost to our detriment, because it's like, well, no, the text needs to speak for itself before this guy who, can we really trust what he's saying? Because he's trying to look good to the Romans, right? So is everything accurate then? And so anyway, I look at it first and foremost on the basis of the text, that if these covenantal categories, right, of those in Abraham, in the Mosaic covenant, in Davidic covenant and restoration covenant after that, right? If they and some of it is the question of, all right, and this gets into conflict over dispensationalism and things like that. The question is, like, what was Israel for, in the first place, right? Why did God choose them out of all the nations of the world? Because they're the best and so awesome. And like, no, that's not why. He chose them to be the people that would minister to all the other nations, that would be a priestly nation to all the nations, and minister the gospel in seed form, anachronistically, to the nations, and also to be the people through which the chosen seed would come, right? That's why you look at the history of the Old Testament, they're really bad. And I don't say this as somebody who's like, oh, I'm really critical of Jewish people and stuff like that. Like, just objectively looking at the text, they're awful. They're constantly apostatizing. They're constantly rebelling against God. They're constantly doing evil stuff. And God puts up with them. He is extraordinarily gracious toward them. And he preserves them.
That's such a comfort to me, because I recognize myself in them so much. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't that us?
Like, you are David, actually. You are. And you're not only David, you're also, you're not just David when he's, killing Goliath. You're David when he's with Bathsheba. You are all these. This is about you as a Christian. This is your history.
Mm-hmm.
And we're the same way. I mean, and Paul says the same thing, right? Don't be haughty and think you're so great because you're brought into the tree, right? The same thing that's happened to them can happen to you.
Exactly.
And so
that's why I want to argue with you, man. I want to argue, dude. You just need to come to the confessional view, because it's you're almost there.
Well, the confession.
So I want to argue that. Let me make my case, and then you argue against me. It'll be fun.
Okay, go ahead.
I agree with everything. Like, they are not necessarily a covenanted category in a sense of like God's chosen people, in the sense of like dispensationalism. I'm totally opposed to that.
Yeah.
I actually am partial preterist when it comes to the book of Revelation, Matthew 24 and all that stuff. So I'm with you all on that. But I see the warnings there in Romans as like, the Gentiles have been grafted in to what? The vine, which is true Israel.
Yeah,
and
which
this
is Christ.
ethnic group of people that were there by blood have been kicked out because of their rebellion to Christ. But don't be brag and bold and brag about that, because God could easily remove you. Furthermore, here's this mystery that nobody knows. God in his kindness, because I would think of the sake of the fathers, the sake of is going to bring them to repentance, and it'll be a blessing for the world as all the nations come to Christ. And I think we would probably actually arrive almost. If I was a betting man, you're going to arrive that whatever the nation of Israel in the Middle East is, it's going to repent and believe in Jesus.
I think so. I mean, well, yes and no. I mean, I look at it and think when we base our eschatology, and this is maybe where it's more fundamental, the disagreement with someone like Doug, where it's like if we base our eschatology on the fact that Israel has to exist or it doesn't work, it's all fake, then that's a problem, right? Because then, say throughout the course of history, and I think this is actually a very serious problem for it, that secularism. This is a point when we were sitting around the campfire talking that I brought up. Like secularism has certainly done a number on the church. Has really hurt us badly. That goes almost without saying. But it's also done a huge number on Judaism as well, even worse. And you're more secular and liberal Judaism, like that's dying out quick. The only ones that are having children are like the ultra Orthodox Hasidic Jews, and even they their birth rates are not super great. And so you look at it, and this is what ironically, like you go back to the post-war consensus, full circle, right? It destroys identity, it destroys heritage, it destroys particular peoples, and it does so to them as well. I mean, you even kind of see this like right now, contemporary political stuff, where it's interesting. You look at the only presidential debate between Trump and Kamala, and you look at the debate with J.D. Vance and Tim Walz, and they didn't have very many questions about the war in Gaza at all. I think they started out with one because Israel was about to attack Iran or something like that, and they both kind of did the boilerplate. Yeah, we stand with Israel, so on and so forth. But they didn't get into any details about it. And it's interesting. Like if you probably don't have a ton of friends. I don't have a ton of friends that are just they love.
I have a ton of friends, man. I have a ton of friends.
I have a ton of friends too. But
show, you don't have a ton of friends.
You don't have a ton of friends that like Kamala, right? I don't.
No, I don't.
But if you talk to just kind of your normie Kamala supporter and ask them, hey, what's your opinion on the Gaza war, right? And I'm not talking about like far left, freakazoid, Antifa, BLM types, just kind of the person that would just stick a Kamala sign in the yard, right? They don't know what to think about that. They have and these are people that are opinionated about everything, right? They don't know because the regime hasn't like downloaded that information into the NPC about what they're supposed to believe about this, because there's conflict within the regime over Israel. And a lot of that is because this is like the very last nation state that is constituted in kind of the older Westphalian system, where it's like, no, this is our nation and we have a state and we're a particular people. It's the only one that's allowed to exist anymore in the world. And so the very far left and the elements of it in the regime, that's the reason they hate it, right? They don't hate it because they just really don't like Jews, because most of them are, at the very top are Jewish themselves, right? You think like someone like, I mentioned his name, like George Soros is very anti-Israel, right? He hates Israel. And he himself, this comes as a shock to a lot of people that don't know this, right? He is Jewish. And a lot of the like far left Jewish figures hate Israel, hate Zionism, and are committed to destroying it. And not because, not in the same reason, for the same reasons that like a, far right anti-Semite would not like Israel, but because, right, they see it as a, Western European nation that they want to destroy, right? They see that they're oppressing brown people in Gaza, right? That they see it in these kind of like BLM, terms, right? Just like America came and we had slaves and we killed all the Indians and we did genocide and all the, like, they view it in the same way that's what they're doing to the people in Gaza and the West Bank. Like, they view it in those terms, and they oppose it for those like, you look at the protests last spring, and or even the people that go to Kamala rallies and start heckling her, like, that's what it's over, right? And so, right, if like they win, right, if the left wins and Israel just collapses, and secularism keeps progressing and just destroys Jewish identity and their heritage and everything else, and they simply stop having children. They simply they don't pass on their traditions, everything else, and in like 150 or 200 years, they're just a historical footnote memory, right? There isn't anything present that exists. This is the weave, right? This is a long tangent. There's a point to it. Right, with someone who holds to my eschatology won't work unless there's a Jewish people that eventually are grafted back in, and there's this great conversion of the Jews at the end. But if they don't exist as an historical people in 200 years, right, would we have to create them? Right, would we have to like evangelize people to become Jewish so then we could convert them to become Christians, right? And it's a hypothetical, obviously, right?
Yeah,
but it's worth considering.
I'm not sure.
Like, what do you do if that happens, though? Right? What happens to our eschatology?
Obviously, we adjust it, right? The same reason if somehow me and you,
the people of that bloodline, because they're still going to have kids, right?
If suddenly we get raptured, we suddenly get raptured, and we're up in the sky, we're going to change our eschatology, we'll change our views on the fly.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Exactly. That's what I always say to my dispensationalist friends. Yeah.
But to argue against what you've just said is like, we're here 2,000 plus years. Mm-hmm. And God's providence has actually led to but whether you think it's a good thing or a bad thing, has led to a reestablishment of a nation called Israel in the Middle East, and has kept a particular ethnic group of people, Jews, existing. And so I look at that and I think, not therefore dispensationalism, get out your Tim LaHaye and let's start looking for Nikolai Carpathia or whatever to be the Antichrist.
Right. Yeah.
I think, no, God's got purpose. And I pray what the Westminster says we ought to pray in the Lord's Prayer, which is for the conversion of the Jews. Not because in any sense that I have this loyalty to Jews over Americans or any of that.
Yeah.
But I do believe that that'll be a good thing. That'll be a blessing for the world when that occurs.
Absolutely.
And so,
yeah.
Hey,
I
didn't have you on the debate that particular aspect of it.
No, it's good. It's
fun.
good. But I mean, even on that point, right? Even on that point, like you read the chapter in the book I did with Torba. It's funny, like people, it's the Jews, this anti-Semite. And in that chapter, right, we go to great pains to say we want them to be Christians, right? We want their ultimate good, right? That, like, if you
believe that a Jew can become a Christian?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay. Just making sure.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's funny, like people will be like, oh, no, they can't ever. And it's like, what do you mean? Everybody can. Of course you can. And so, no, I look at, I look at things, from the Reformed perspective, right? And, of course people can. And I want that, right? I mean, I've said like many times, like I would love, right, to sit down with Ben Shapiro and present the gospel to him. And actually, like, one of the reasons we wrote the chapter on Judeo-Christianity is because I honestly think that concept has done such tremendous damage to our witness to Jews, because we conflate the two together. We think, oh, these are our older brothers in the faith, and they just don't have, they got everything except for Jesus. And it's like, well, if you don't have that, you don't have anything. And and on top of that, it blurs these distinctions that are incredibly important. And I don't want Ben Shapiro and people like him to go to hell. Right? I want them to know Jesus and be in glory with us. Right? Like that.
Yep.
That's not something that somebody who just like hates Jews says, I don't think. I guess I'm the worst.
You're the worst.
The worst Jew hater in the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
and so no, I think, and so when we conflate, Judaism and Christianity together, and say, well, they about the Old Testament, and it's like, well, no, like their religion comes out of rejection of Christ. It comes out of the temple gets destroyed, the high priesthood gets destroyed. The only thing left are the traditions of the scribes and the Pharisees, and that's where the Talmud and the Mishnah and all of the traditions today come from. Right? That's all that's left, is the stuff that Jesus hated the most. And so you're gonna say like, oh, we're kind of the same, like that. No, that harms things. Like you actually have to push the antithesis to be able to say like, no, you have nothing at all other than rejection of Christ, and you need to bow the knee to him, right? You need this, right? You need Jesus. And so anyway, like that's the heart of it. And I think so many people, because we're steeped in dispensationalism, because we're steeped in those who bless Israel will be blessed kind of nonsense. We have nothing that we can say that they will listen to, right? We have no means to lead them to Christ if we're saying you're pretty much good where you're at. God, you're the special holy people. God really, really loves you. When it's like, no, without Christ, you're cursed. This is the worst thing for you, is to not have Jesus. And so, right, that's I say these things and write about these things, talk about these things, because I care about the church, right? Because I care about the future of the gospel and our evangelistic efforts to all the peoples of the world, right? That's why. And if you blur all this stuff and you make it really unclear, right? In the same way, if I was going to talk to a Muslim and say, well, you've got respect for Jesus and you're kind of halfway there already, right? And you believe in God, right? You're pretty close, right? That's not the right approach. I think you are very far off. You don't know Jesus at all. You don't know what's true. You don't know who God is at all. All right. That is how you would evangelize them, right? And so, but we're terrified to do that because I think a lot of the post-war stuff where it's like, oh, well, if you start saying that they're going to hell, you're pretty much Hitler. Well, they are, right? You would rather, you're more concerned about not being called a Nazi than you are their souls, right? Like that's just bizarre to me. I don't know. Maybe I'm just too autistic about it. But
no, I don't.
This
I
is
don't
bizarre
think
to
so.
me. Like, you don't care about these people. They're going to spend eternity in hell because you're afraid of upsetting someone, right? What?
I remember when I went to Israel. So I went to Israel a couple of years ago. It's been over a year ago to go preach the gospel. Had an amazing conversation with Jews and with Muslims. But I can remember somebody being like, well, why are you doing that? Why go over there? Why, it's like, they don't really need that. They've already got their stuff. And it's based on kind of this kind of thing. And you're like, no, brother, they need this.
Yeah.
And what's funny is the whole thing is they don't, at least the Hasidic Orthodox Jews and the Jews that we talked to over there, even the secular Jews, they would not say Judo-Christian values.
No.
No.
No, absolutely not.
For that. Right? So they think all Christians are Hitler in a sense. I mean, they've been taught taught to think that, and so you got to work through a lot of that.
Oh yeah.
But we had a lot of good conversations with both secular and Orthodox Jews and Muslims. So I have a real heart for reaching them as a people, and I know that there are brothers that are of Jewish ethnicity that are solid brothers in the faith, and so it actually, and the ones that I know are very open and clear about saying no, Judaism and is wicked in what it teaches. And they're also clear that Jews have done a lot of dumb stuff. We're talking stereotypically, we're talking large group. We're not saying every individual.
Judging
is
groups
George
rather than
Soros.
individuals. Yeah.
And you got to be able to make those judgments. Paul does.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there is, so here is, I want to kind of finish with this then, is pastoral concerns again. So everything I think other than our disagreement about Romans and the final state of things, that's in-house. But I think there's always a concern that some have that when we talk about Jews or any of this thing, immediately you're anti-Semitic and you hate Jews. I think you've made it clear you don't hate Jews, but
hope so.
So here's a question. I think there can be. I think there's two ditches. My congregation is probably sick of me. They know that I'm always going to say there's ditches here, man, and two ditches.
Yeah.
Here, the one ditch is the dispensational or the kind of just rah, go Jews. I think another ditch is to take the truths we've talked about and now run with it to like the real force behind all the problems that we've mentioned earlier is Jews, in the sense that
they're causing everything. Yeah.
They're behind every little bad thing. You bumped your elbow on the way down the steps, stupid Jews. Put that thing there. I'm being joking, but they're. So I feel like there is a ditch of anti-Semitism, and I think I've dealt with people that are that way online that are in our types of circles. So, question for you: do you believe that is a real danger, and what could we, as when we speak to these topics, without getting into everything you say is anti-Semitic? I don't. If they call me a racist, I don't give a rip. I don't care.
Yeah.
They call me a Nazi, I don't give a rip. But I'm not going to be a Nazi because they call me a Nazi.
Well, of course, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to be anti-Semitic. I don't even really like the term anti-Semitic. I don't like the term racist because I think they're just so overplayed. Well, but
both those terms are like intentionally ambiguous, right? And
so that's to say ethnic vain glory and hatred of other people.
Yeah.
Do you feel like those are issues, and how do we deal with them?
Yeah, I think so. And I think the way to deal with people falling into that ditch is not, because everyone's coming up, a few things are happening. One is the Overton window is shifting massively, where people are encountering the idea that maybe as a group, right, that ethnic group has there are many people in there that have done some bad things and have, if you want to talk about pornography or various academic things or, political ideological things, communism and socialism and so forth, right? And they see like, no one told me. Like, so part of this is because like the post-war consensus is like, all this stuff is hidden away and repressed. You wake up one day and you discover, like the leadership of the Soviet Union and the whole Bolshevik Revolution, that was Jewish. No one ever told me. And then like this is what happens with guys when they get they get red pilled on things. It's like, all the major purveyors of pornography, like Pornhub, is owned by a rabbi, and it's all Jewish guys and everything. And it's like, whoa, my goodness. And so then then you go down the road of anything bad happens.
Stage,
they're in charge. Yeah, it's a cage stage thing where it's like, it's them, they're doing it, and you have to reel people back in, where it's like, okay, all of those things are actually, that's true, right? whether you talked about the Soviet Union or pornography or, the push towards secularism within academia and so forth. I mean, all of the abortion movement, the pro-gay movement, NGOs today that push immigration. But once you get past that, right? Once you get past that stage, you realize they're not the only people doing bad things in the world. I mean, they maybe are overrepresented among the left and people destroying culture. But they're not the only. And mentally, if you think, okay, if they just never existed, right? If they didn't exist and they're not part of the calculus whatsoever, would there still be all of these things happening? I think so, definitely, right? We have enemies that want to destroy the church, they want to destroy America, destroy Christianity, and they are not Jewish, right? And so you show people that it's way broader than that, way bigger than that, and show them that no, like the answer is not okay. You just need to think now Hitler is a good guy, right? That National Socialism was right and it was good, but rather to see that, all right, they're enemies of the church. That whether you just focus politically on the left or whatever, but like cultural, political, spiritual enemies, and it's all really, really bad. It's all horrible, and it's not just all these. If we just take care of this one little problem, then we're fine. Like, no, that's not it at all. It's way bigger than that. It's way bigger than one group of people. And some of it too. Like I mentioned this when I was with Doug. I remember, I think it's maybe 2018 when there was a young kid at, I believe, an OPC church in Escondido, California, whose father was an elder in the church. He went and shot up a synagogue, right? Remember there were a lot of guys who were like, see, this stuff is a problem in our churches. We got to root all this out. We got to destroy it and everything. And my perspective on it immediately was, because I was, even at that time, like seeing things online and seeing the online right and a lot of the discourse, surrounding this issue. And my immediate thought was, why did this kid just up and go do this and didn't talk to his dad, talk to his pastor about any of the things he was because he was clearly like radicalized online. Why didn't he talk to anybody at all? And of course, like, I knew the answer. It's because if he goes to his pastor, hey, pastor, I see that the Jews are involved in pornography and communism and all these horrible things. And, what do you think about that? Like, immediately you'd be like, all right, we're going to file charges. You're going to be excommunicated. He's just going to get out don't even come back to the church, right? He wouldn't, pastorally sit him down and say like, yeah, those things are bad. But number one, don't do anything evil and horribly wicked and don't go shoot a bunch of Jewish grandmas in their synagogue. Like, what? Don't do that, right? The answer to these things that you see are a problem is to lead a faithful, godly Christian life and build the kingdom of God in spite of the people that are our enemies, right? That's the answer to that, right? Because there's no one who, guys like that, and I think there are hundreds or thousands of them, maybe, not violent like that, but, being radicalized, thinking these same things, where they need to be reeled back in to pursue what the Lord Jesus Christ wants for them and to obey him and to live faithfully, that are not being patiently, fatherly, shepherded, right? They think, if I go talk about these things with my pastor, I'm going to be condemned, I'm going to be hated, and I can't do that. And that's, I think, what we have to grapple with and deal with is, how do you approach these guys to begin thinking of this, and it's funny because like if you had a young guy in your congregation who was like, when I was a teenager, I got really into pornography, or I was molested when I was 8 years old, and I've struggled with that, and I have feelings for men, and I'm gay, right? If a young guy like that, which very common thing for pastors to have to deal with today, comes to you and says, like, I know this is bad. Or even if he's gone even further off the deep end where it's like, well, I don't know if the Bible actually condemns homosexuality, and he's starting to go down the evangelical road. Like, how would you deal with that? You would be very careful, very kind and loving and generous, and say, let's just talk about this. Let's discuss these things. You would hear out what he has to say. You would sympathize with the things that have happened to him. You would just listen, right? You would do what a good father would do in those circumstances. But when it comes to stuff like this, which is there's way more of it now, we're like, no, you're evil, you're bad, just get out of here. And if any pastor today did that with a young guy struggling with homosexuality, we'd be like, what is wrong with you? Why would you do that to that guy? Right? And so I think we have to, operate with equal weights and measures with things that are, potentially very dangerous, because the hearts of our young men are being attacked, right? They're being attacked from the left, and all sorts of culturally left things, and it's just pervades all of society, and it's very easy for them to fall to those things. But there's also the reaction to that they are going to react to it not in a Christian way, right? They're going to react to it in a godless way. They're going to be open to the people that are saying things, many of which are true, that no Christian pastor is ever going to say out loud, because he's terrified to. And for that reason, right, there's not going to be any trust from our young men with their pastors and their leaders, because like, that guy's afraid to say this thing, I'm not going to listen to what he has to say. And so that, I think, is the greatest danger. It's like, oh, these terrible, horrible guys, sharing anti-Semitic memes, right? We got to crush them. We got to drive them out of the church. We can never tolerate this ever. And it's like, do you care about their souls, right? Do you care about them, or you just care about, not getting bad PR, right? Not
Sure.
Having a bad reputation, not being involved with these dirty, icky people. And so I think it requires a very humble pastoral heart to deal with this stuff. And I mean, I think about it with you mentioned the situation with Joel. That's what he's doing, right? He has a guy that he's reeling back in from that ditch, and he cares about him more than he cares about his own reputation, and his own reputation being dragged through the mud by guys who are lying about him now. And so I think if we want to be good pastors, that's the stuff that we got to be willing to do, right? A shepherd gets down in the mud with the sheep, and he's going to get dirty. And,
Sure.
And so that would be my advice, I guess, to pastors, because you're going to be dealing with this stuff. Like, it's not going away, right? You think, oh, well, we just squashed Christian nationalism in the church. Like I've already showed, like, this is stuff from online coming outside, coming in, that you have to deal with. It's not something that's there. If we just nip it in the bud, it's going away. It's like, no, this is the trajectory that culturally and politically that we are on, and it's going to be a thing for the next 10, 20 years, and we have to learn to be faithful, right? We have to learn to be faithful in those circumstances, and it's new circumstances that people are not equipped and prepared for, that we haven't ever thought about. We're thinking in the old modes, the old categories of 20 or 30 years ago, and that's that's not where we're at today.
Well, that's very helpful. I kind of got three things to just want to toss out there, and then I said three, but they're going to be quick thoughts that I've had.
It's a whole Baptist sermon coming. Here we go.
I got a 3-point sermon and a little prayer, a little psalm, a little poem at the end.
That's right.
Roses are red. I recently was getting in a debate with some men that I dearly love on this issue, and one of the pastors was very helpful. Talked about the difference between Thomas Jefferson and John Adams when it comes to some of the revolution stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And, they were close, and then they were not. And one of the reasons they were not was that Thomas Jefferson was like, I'll get into the fray with the revolution, and I'll lead it and help direct it in good direction. And John Adams was like, you can't do that. You just got to blast it. And I don't know. I think you can maybe in history say maybe John Adams was a little bit more right there, and that Thomas Jefferson really wasn't able to keep the French Revolution from going crazy.
Yeah.
But also I think Thomas Jefferson probably did help in ways to keep it from going even more crazy. But he brought that up to say different pastors are going to sometimes come to different conclusions on how to deal with some of this, and I'm in that particular scenario, I'm Thomas Jefferson. I'll get in with Christian nationalists. I believe in it, and I want to help. I want to do what you have mentioned, is help disciple these kind of men, because I believe that's where God's working. I believe God's working in men right now, restoring them to the church. I do think, and so this is not to contradict anything you said, but recently on Twitter I said we have to shame. Is one of the things about, at least in Stephen Wolf's definition of Christian nationalism, is that social pressure is used to help people conform to Christianity. And so we do have to, I think, put shame on certain things. And so, again, the ditch of I just want to, for shorthand, called the Nazi ditch. I think we do have to put shame on that in one sense of like, not that everybody questions all the details and how many numbers of people and who gives a rip about all that. But there are men who want to drag people, followers after themselves. Scripture talks about that. They rise up not from the left only, but from among us. And we have to be careful. So I have a lot of patience for individual men, young men. I have a little bit less patience for those trying to be teachers and are pushing the garbage that harms souls. And so I think as a pastor, I want to come along and do everything you've said, while also saying, and you probably don't even disagree, you guys need to be careful about X, Y, Z. This guy is not helpful for your soul. And then third thought I had, and this is going to bring us all the way around back to the beginning. You ready? Here it is. This is it. It's Inception. Here we are. You were talking about the problem's not just the Jews; it's all the stuff. And this is maybe a little pietistic sounding, but it's the truth. At the end of Star Trek V, the movie, William Shatner, they've been looking for God. You remember me telling you this?
Yeah.
He wrote this line, which is why it's so funny, because he wrote it and he made himself say it. He said, you guys were looking for God all out there. The problem was you should have been looking right here. And he points at himself. I think I would say something very similar, is that when we talk about all the problems and stuff, they are out there. There are wicked groups. There are conspiracies. People plot in vain, Scripture, Psalm 2. But also we should take a little William Shatner and also point the thumb at ourselves. Right? Some of the problem is me. And I've got to reform my life. And I've got to bring it to the gospel. And we got to reform our churches.
Yeah, I don't think that's, I mean, there's a way people can hear that. Oh, pietism. Oh, no. I don't think it is pietistic to say,
I don't even.
We sin. We sin and we need to repent of our sin. Right. And for all, and I mean, I say this in my preaching all the time, where it's like, some people maybe don't like culture war kind of preaching, and too bad. But whenever I'm preaching about all the stuff out there, all the evil, horrible, terrible stuff out there, it's like, yeah, we have all these enemies out there. They're destroying things, and you see it every day on the TV and online. But our greatest problem is like right here. It's my own sin is my greatest problem, and our greatest problem is each of us our own sin that we need to put that to death, right? How do we defeat those enemies out there? It's that, right? It's putting to death our own sin, and so it's not, it would be pietistic if you just said none of that matters out there at all.
Yeah.
It's only in here, and that's what a lot of guys do, right? And that's what is driving a lot of guys out of the church, quite frankly. It's like, yes, you want to beat those people, you need to fight in here first and foremost. And that's how you succeed, right? And I think honestly, I think a lot of especially the really low IQ, the Jews are bad, is guys that feel a tremendous amount of shame over porn use, right? I think a lot of it is that. It's like, the Jews did this to me, and it's like, well, you got to fight it. You put it to death. And yeah, you can blame the rabbi that owns Pornhub all day long, but it's you.
You put the money in his pocket.
Yeah, it's you that are the problem. So stop. You want to defeat them, and like that's how you do it is stopping, right? Repenting, putting it to death, and so like if anything, like all these things, if you're thinking about like reeling the guys back in from the ditch, right? The left has done these horrible things, and there's a reaction happening, and reeling them back from the overreaction, and staying within, the Christian faith and Christian orthodoxy, right? The way you do it is, right, you want to beat them, right? This is how, with faithful Christian living, and that's the only way that we're going to beat them, right? That's how.
Well, hey, brother, this has been a blessing. I've been encouraged. We've gone back and forth. We're an hour short of Joe Rogan, so unless you got opinions on whales, do you have anything about whales and wind that you want to talk about?
I would love to be a whale psychiatrist, but no, I don't think we'll get into those today.
All right. Well, hey, God bless you. Bless your planting of a church in Tennessee, and your move, and your family. So thank you, brother, for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Hello, I'm Pastor Joseph Spurgeon, and welcome to Sovereign King Church. What could you expect at Sovereign King Church when you come? We are a church committed to being nothing new. We're not trying to create a new religion. We are Christianity. In the day that we live, the old things of Christ are pretty rare. To find a place where the gospel is proclaimed, that's not new. It's what the church has always done, but for many people, it's like, this is new, but it's refreshing. I hope it'll be refreshing for you.
Wherever you're at in your walk, your spiritual journey, there's a place for you here at Sovereign King Church, and it's not just a hospital for the sick. It's a place where we strategizing, and we prepare to go into the battle together.
We want to invite you to come join us and be a part of this work. We still are very much about proclaiming the gospel in and outside of the church.
There's a place for you to serve in Sovereign King Church.